This is a circle cutting jig, and I'm going to be using this later. I'll talk about it. And this is part of it that is used for the circle cutting jig. On this one, the point is very small, very delicate for turning a circle. What I did is I just piece of wood and I put in a bolt, so I've got something a little more substantial. And with this in the circle cutting jig, and then I cut some masonite blocks, and with this is how I turn it, and you'll see here just a minute. So this is how I put in the veneer. One of the most important things is the piece of wood you're going to start with. Now, for demo pieces, you want to, I trued this up. Hopefully it is a perfect cube. I flattened each side, and I went and I found the exact center. And then I ran a line down to the bottom so I could find the center of the edge. And now if you take this jig, I've got to underline the jig through the pivot point. And I've also got some lines perpendicular, so 90 degrees to the center. Now taking this part of the blank and lining it up directly on the center of the piece, and that's how we get set up. I cannot emphasize enough, you got to make sure this is a good, that if this is not square, also on the top of this, if you can see it, witness lines running right here. It's important to mark one of the sides of the block, and you'll see why later on when we're on here. On here, the other thing before I glue it down, on this surface, I would drill 2 holes for dowels. And again, you'll see why in just a little while why we want this. It makes the glue up a lot easier. Looking at the jig, as I said, I've got a center line running right down through the pivot point. You want to make sure, as a matter of fact, I've also got a center line on this also, so I know where the center is. Centering everything up, you want the center line or this pivot point to be right at the front tooth, the front teeth of your bandsaw blade. Now, with this setting here, obviously to set it on the pivot point, you got to do something. I hot glue across the back, underneath, and across the front of it, and I'll show you that in a second. Just hot glue it on, this way it can be easily broken off. I've got my height of the bandsaw set, but the one thing you've got to ask is, okay, how do I figure out where I want to take and put the veneer? This bowl, I've got the veneer on the top half, so that as it curves in, it shows off the design. So you either want it on the center line or on the top for the bowl. So what I've got now on my circle cutter, or my jig for cutting this, so there is the other here, and pan out, Jerry, I just want to show. I want to make sure this slide doesn't move, so I've just got a plain old spring. And so now it can't slide in and out. So I'm going to take and push this in, bring this to its final normal cut position, and it should be close to that line right there. So I've got one line here, and then when it's centered, it's just about on that other line. One thing that you definitely want to do, and I'll push this out of the way for now, bring this back to its cutting position. You want to take the circle cutter and clamp it to the bed of the bandsaw so that after pushing this through the bandsaw, the table doesn't move. And you may ask, I realize that has to be clamped. As a matter of fact, that one bowl where the two parallel waves, they touch at one side and they're wide at the other side, it's because my table moved as I was cutting the blank. And I first thought I'd messed everything up, but then I realized I could turn the bowl down a little bit and let the two touch and have a very unique design. Now, God help me if I know how I'll ever reproduce that mistake. Now I'm just going to, a little safety beforehand. It's going to take a lot of pressure, even with a sharp blade, to go through wood. So I put my one hand down here and it helps me pivot, and then I will push on the back of it, the blank, so I'm staying well away from those blades, that blade. Okay, and with that, we'll get started. It's quite a bit of force to go through this 7.5-inch block. So you can see why you want to make sure that this table is clamped to the bandsaw table. Otherwise, you just sit here and put in on the table and also do this. So it's just easier. Okay, so now we've got a radius surface there. I've got a radius surface here. As a matter of fact, you can see I cut some of the bottom of the masonite. I've got a whole series of these that I find one that works. So at this point, this is ready now to glue up. Now, I will say, if you're going to take and make an intersecting sine wave, like this bowl, you have to make sure you keep the exact same pivot point. So either you keep this clamped to the circle cutter, or as in this case, I went and put a mark on the side. So if I want to go with intersecting sine waves, I can. And if I want to go through parallel sine waves, well, I just take and move this back a 1/2 inch and the sine waves will be 1/2 inch apart. And on this one, I haven't made a decision yet if I'm going to do parallel or intersecting. So I'm going to keep the pivot glued to this. I'm not going to take it off right now. Okay, we'll take and relocate over to my workbench and what to do with the rest, do next on this. Okay, as a matter of fact, here you can see where I drilled the 2 holes for dowels. And now you're going to see why you want to drill those. And you want to drill those inside the circle of what's going to be the opening of your bowl. You're going to turn them out, so it doesn't make any difference. Because when you go to start gluing this up, what's this blank going to do? It's going to want to do this. And so to make sure that doesn't happen, you get a couple dowels, which we will put in. Okay, now also I've got the veneer cut. I've got 2 pieces of veneer, black veneer, and you're going to want to make sure you place them because they've got a normal curvature on the wood. The grain's going this way. So you want to make sure you put that in the same direction. Otherwise, If you put it this way, while you're fighting it, it's going to want to spring back when you're playing with it. I mean, it works, but it's just easier to have it hold in place. At least I have found that. Okay, so what we're going to do, so we've got, and this is the time where it's going to be, I'm not going to do a lot of talking because I'm going to want to get this glued up before the glue sets up. Okay, now I take a scratch awl and I just punch through the two pieces of veneer and then drive home. They don't have to be flush. Clamp this thing up. That's everything in clamping it up. If you don't glue the blank together real well, it could fly apart when you're turning, just like if it was a segmented piece. If it's not well glued, it can be very, very dangerous. The other way to would be to clamp this, would be to put it in a press. I just prefer to put the clamps this way. Make sure I get good clamping in each corner and in the area that I'm going to be turning it in the center, where because these corners I'm going to cut off before we even get started turning. So I'm not concerned about that. With the modern glues, as long as I've got this clamp for 20 minutes, I mean, I feel I'm safe. And then just leaving it overnight, and it's not a bad idea to check them to make sure that they haven't loosened up. You know, wait till the next day to turn it. I agree with you completely, John. I believe in a 24-hour cure on this stuff. Well, I will mention Mark sent out the my script, so that if you've got, you know, it pretty much run you through and how to do things. And of course, obviously, if anybody wants to try this, they got questions, give me a call. You know, it's with this setting up overnight, obviously I can't use the one we just cut, but I've got another one that I had cut up and glued up before. And if you can see, I've got one curve this way, and then I rotate it 90, and then there's another curve. And the curve on this side comes out as a straight line on this side, and this curve comes out as a straight line on this side. So this one will be intersecting waves. And if you can see here on this this surface, you see 1, 2, 3, 4 dowels that have been put in. So I drilled 2 holes, I cut it, glued it all together, drilled 2 other holes, and now I'll show you what you have to do to be able to get the intersecting. Okay, when this was put on originally, this would have on here, and this would have done the curve right through here. Now, if you take the blank, rotate it exactly 90 degrees, you'll then get another curve going this way. And this is the one I eventually will put on the lathe and partially turn so you can see how it comes out. So that is how you'll get intersecting. Now, Ken, if you go back to my pictures, and I'm hit a picture, then come back to me, picture, come back to me. Okay, the very first one, how do I do two-tone? Well, basically, just with this, I took 2 pieces of wood, one dark, one light, stack them on top of, obviously these wouldn't work because they aren't the same size. Come on top of each other. You run beads of hot glue around it, so it becomes one single piece. Circle cutting, run it through your jig to get the curve on it, and then swap out pieces. So one of them will be dark on the top, one will be dark on the bottom, one will be light on the bottom. So basically, you make rolls at the same. And you don't need to put veneer. You could put veneer in. On the one that I showed, I didn't. Okay, now the two parallel. As I was talking about earlier today, if you put the blank on, now turn your curve together, and then just move the pivot point back or forward. I normally do it about a 1/2 inch. Cut another one, and then this way, two parallel sine waves. Okay, can go back to the pictures. And then there's the two parallel ones. Go to the next one. Okay, in that case, as I said when we showed it originally, I just cut it in one piece of, the curve, and then I went and cut on the top rim to get something in that same direction. By having it touch at one point and not touch on the other side. Okay, to do that, basically, zoom out, Jerry. Yeah, there we go. What happened when I was cutting this curve, this whole table moving this way. Not much, but just a little bit. But it made so that the two curves, instead of being parallel to each other, they had different center points relative to the saw blade. So they became like this, and so they almost touched at one side and were wider at the other. This is one of those happy accidents. This is one of them that John Beaver, when I showed this picture to John, that he had never attempted. But, as soon as he saw it, he knew how it would be done. So to get 3 intersecting ones, so 5, basically, you take a blank like this and cut 2 45s evenly. I mean, you got to have the exact center and exactly, the same distance from the center line and 45 degrees. So you cut one with the blank, cut across here, one here, and then one over here again with your cut over here. So that's 3 glue ups. So it takes you 3 days to generate the blank curing time, because without a 24-hour cure, I wouldn't put it on the bandsaw. Even though this isn't a demonstration on cutting circles or using circle cutter, I figured I might as well do it while with this blank. Obviously, you could go to the lathe and start turning it, but I prefer to go and cut the corners off. You could do it just handheld, etc., but using the circle cutting jig. So I've got my center point, and to use the circle cutting jig, I make sure I clamp this down. And I'm just going to check to see that it is actually indeed square. And also, if you're a pen maker, this would be big enough block. You could also get nice pen blanks. Okay, just pull the jig back so I can get started in it. And then I'm just literally going to take and finish pushing it in. You're not going to hear, you'll probably be able to hear me once I start the saw. And just cut a nice circle off of it. So here we go. As a matter of fact, on some of these pieces, you can see how the pattern is already starting just by cutting off the corners. And if you look at this, you can see right away, bam, there's your two intersecting sine waves. So, as I said, I'll toss these in my gene box. So put them into some crazy quilt bowls. Now, the circle cutter, as I said, again, if anybody is interested in how to make one of these things, just let me know. This is one of the things the Tuesday group did many years ago, made these things. As I said, I use it all the time. It's a good way to get the blank down, get those corners off so you're not wasting the time and also possibly chipping the corners. Okay, the one thing I am a believer in screw chucks. So I'm going to take and mount this on the lathe with my screw chuck. And again, I'm just going to turn a little of this so you get the idea of what's going to happen, even though, pretty much you can see that already. I'll put this on my screw chuck. I've got this set down low. So right now I'm just going to take and turn very quickly, just a rough shape so that you can get the idea of what this will look like. Part of doing it on here is that when you show it to people and they look inside the bowl and they see the same design on the inside, you always get the question, how'd you do that? Because at first they think it's just a veneer inlay on the outside of the bowl. The center is just about in the center. When I do that, I'll bring the high point a bit closer to this low part of the wave. With the veneer that I've got, most of it is just the normal thin veneer. I would use just one. If you can buy thick veneer, and I've got some thick veneer holly. This one, yeah, this one's got 2 layers in it. If you've got the much thicker veneer, which you can buy, layer would be enough. You can also put 3 layers in. It depends on how wide you want the wave to be. Where you could take and put layers. Got a light bowl like this. You could start with a black layer, go to a holly white layer, then go to a black layer, or put a red layer, a green layer, and a red layer. Let your imagination, go. Don't get roped into just the ones I've done. because you can get veneers in all different type of colors. Okay, yeah, if people are interested in this concept, feel free to give me a call. And as I said, if you want to definitely get inspired, so hopefully some of you will get ideas either with, different colored veneers or, do 4 waves or 5 waves. It's just figuring out how to set up the angles on the block in order to do the different types of waves. Let your imagination go.